If you knew you would live a healthy life all the way to age 100, what would you do different with your time and your money right now? Welcome to Retirement Revealed. I'm your host, Jeremy Keil, and on this 200th episode, we're here to turn your retirement savings into retirement income. Today, we're talking with Steve Sanduski about how financial planning changes when people routinely live healthy to age 100. Steve, welcome to the show.
Jeremy, it's great to be here.
Absolutely. And you've been in the financial planning, retirement industry for some years. So you've seen people approaching age 100. You've been thinking about retirement for some time now. Not you personally, although maybe we'll ask you that. But tell me how you came up with this concept, this idea that people are going to live 100. They're going to be healthy to age 100, and of course how your life might change based on that.
Well, I think if you just simply look at the data, if we go back to say 1900, the average age or life expectancy was about 47. And today we're in the upper 70s. Of course, we had COVID, which knocked things down about a year and a half to perhaps 2 years of life expectancy. But I certainly expect that to turn around. So I think if you just look at the trend, if you look at what's happening with technology, if you look at what's happening with medicine and our understanding of health and wellness, I think we are going to see that people will start living longer. And like I say, I think people will routinely live reasonably healthy to 100. And I know I'm doing what I can in that area as well.
Yeah, you got a bit of a personal connection here. You've shared in the past, I've heard you on some podcasts reference that your dad is approaching 100, I believe, and he's got quite an interesting length of retirement, longer than most people would expect. So tell me a little bit about him, but also, I'm not trying to give away your age, but you're basically the average retirement age in America. And how does your experience with your dad, how does your kind of almost a philosophy go into retirement? How does that play into things with your life choices going forward?
Yeah, well, I think I'm seeing it from both ends here. So if I look at my mom and my dad, both of them are still alive. My dad is going to be turning 95 here later in 2024. My mom just turned 90. We had a huge multi-day 90th birthday celebration for my mom here recently, and she said repeatedly this was the best 4 days of her life. And it was just amazing. And both mom and dad, even though they're in their 90s, they're doing reasonably well. They're coherent. They can carry on conversations. They can move. So we're very, very fortunate. So I think I've got some good genes. But what's interesting about my mom and my dad in terms of how retirement worked for them, my dad has what I would consider a very traditional retirement in that he retired early. He took a buyout. He basically worked for one company for more than 30 years, one big public company, AT&T, and retired from there, retired with a pension, retired at 58, and never worked another day in his life for pay. And so he's had a very, very long retirement period. He's really enjoyed it. My mom, on the other hand, she went in and out of, quote, retirement in that she had to continue to do something. So when she quit her career type job, tried to retire, got bored, had to go back to work, took part-time jobs. So I'd say probably for a good 20 years, she was segueing in and out of the workplace after she, quote, retired from her career position. So they have a little bit different experience. For me personally, I'm 62. I'm, a proud 62, I guess you could say. And I don't see traditional retirement on the horizon for me anytime soon. The way that I typically think about it, at least at this point in time, I've got reasonably good health. And so I view it as rather than sort of a cold turkey retirement where just I punch in on a Friday and clock out that day and then I'm retired and never work again. I think I'll probably ease out of retirement over time in that I'll just gradually slow down and reduce the amount of work that I do. But unless I'm forced to, I don't really envision a cold turkey type retirement.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm a student of the retirement research that's out there, and a lot of people are talking about more what you're planning on doing, what your mom did, is kind of the easing over time doing it. And it almost feels like the assumption amongst the retirement pundits is that nobody just works hard until retirement date and quits. And I'm thinking that's almost all my clients are working hard till retirement date and quitting. So it's maybe this this generational shift. You might be on the leading edge of it here, where it seems like more people are like your dad, where they just worked until they quit. I've even got quite a few clients that they come to us and say, I want to retire. When do you retire? When do you want to retire? The answer is yesterday. And then I ask, what are you going to do in retirement? And they don't have a thought of what they want to do in retirement. They just know that they don't want to keep on working. And so it's interesting. I hear a lot of folks kind of pushing this thought towards find your purpose and ease into it, and maybe do consulting and side gigs and things like that. There's still a lot of people that are finding this traditional retirement, and honestly, they're happy afterwards. So it's an interesting thing. I don't see the ennui of people that traditionally retire. They're generally happy, from what I can tell.
Yeah, and you make an interesting point there, in that there's a lot of people who can't wait until their last day of work so that they can retire. And what's interesting is, we talk a lot here in our profession about, are you retiring from something, or are you retiring to something? And I know as a financial advisor, one of the key things that you try and work on is, it's not just retiring from something. It's like, what are you retiring to? And I've heard people say, well, I'm retiring to grandkids. That's really what I want to be spending my time with, is spending a lot more time with my grandkids and other family members. So I think that's one of the keys to a successful retirement, is being able to and having something to retire to, as opposed to just trying to get away from something that you don't like. So that, I think, is certainly a big key there.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had a couple people on, Doc G, who's a podcaster, Dr. Jordan Grummett, and we've had Fritz Gilbert on, who writes the Retirement Manifesto blog. And they're interesting because Doc G, Jordan Grummett, Dr. Grummett, he was kind of going full bore, like 20s and 30s, and doing the doctor lifestyle of like 100-hour a week kind of thing, and said, forget this, I'm just gonna not quit now, but he just went into kind of that eased over time, that phased retirement almost right away. Meanwhile, Fritz Gilbert, he kind of went the traditional, I'm going to go until I hit retirement, and he hit retirement, and he hasn't looked back. Both of them, I think, would say, whichever way you want to go, just go ahead and do it now, do it as soon as you can. But also both of them would highly focus on find your purpose. So Doc G's doing the type of doctor work he likes to do, and the type of book writing and podcasts he likes to do. And Fritz Gilbert is doing things he's found his purpose in his retirement community, and sharing his retirement message with others, and some nonprofits that he and his wife are working on. So it's an interesting thing where it's almost what I'm going to say for them is, it's take control, where a lot of people felt like, well, this is the way I had to do it. Like, I have to work until I'm 62 and then retire. I have to work until Social Security retirement age, or until I hit my pension number. But I think maybe you'd agree that just take control, like find your purpose and go out and get it.
Well, absolutely. And I think there's an interesting set of dynamics that has been happening over the last, I'm going to call it, couple decades, that I think is causing a change to the way retirement is going to unfold over the next few decades, or perhaps even many decades. And so if you think about traditional retirement, or if you think about a traditional life model, it starts off with, we're gonna be born, and then we're gonna basically learn for maybe 20 years or so. So by the time we're in our late teens to early 20s, we're gonna have been through most of our schooling. At that point, we're then gonna get a job. So that starts sort of phase 2 of life, and we may work for 35, maybe 40 years. And then phase 3 is retirement. So that's my dad, right? Where, I call it the learn, earn, and adjourn model, the 3-stage life model. But what I think is happening now is, I think we're moving into more of a multi-stage life model. And this is not something that I created. There's been a lot of academic research in this area, where basically, instead of this sequential learn, earn, adjourn idea, we're going to basically start off, the first is going to be the same, where we're going to learn. But beyond that, we're going to be segueing in and out of multiple life stages, from There may be some periods where we're going to work. There may be some periods where we take a sabbatical. There may be some periods where we go back to school to learn something new because we know things are changing so fast. There may be times when we drop out of the workforce because we need to take care of an ailing family member. There may be times where we just want to travel the world for a year, or take a gap year, or go travel with our kids while they're still young and want to hang out with mom and dad. So we're seeing that starting to happen with the younger generations. And you might be wondering, well, why is that happening now as opposed to, say, with the baby boomer generation? And I think what's happening is, we've seen a lot of this analysis of the generations. Like, we've got the boomers, we've got the Gen Xers, we've got the millennials, we've got the Gen Z. And so that, to me, is a bit of a superficial analysis. And some of the more sophisticated research would indicate that there's really three different things that are going on here in terms of what is impacting a generation and what is causing them to behave the way that they behave. And the first one is what's called the cohort effect. And so this is what we typically think of when we think of a generational analysis, in that the baby boomers, people born from 1946 to like 1964, that was a cohort. They were born within the same period of time. They're going to go through life and experience the same things as a cohort. So that's sort of the traditional generational analysis. But there's two other pieces I think that are really important. One is what's called the period effect. And that is that something happened in the world that affected everyone alive at that time. 9/11, for example, is a great example. The great financial crisis back in 2008, 2009 is another example. So any adult at that period of time was affected by that. So that's called the period effect. And then the third is called the life cycle effect, which is that as people grow over time and age, they tend to have different life stages or life experiences as they grow older, whether it's starting a family, whether it's aging and retiring and that sort of thing. So if you look at the younger generations and you look at what, say, the period effect in particular was happening with them, that to me is what is causing sort of this move to this multi-stage life model, because they were affected by things like the great financial crisis. They personally were affected. They saw their parents who were affected. We've seen, the opioid crisis. We've seen, deaths of despair. I mean, we've seen a lot of things that have happened to the younger generations that's really affecting how they think about life. And so I think that is affecting the way people think. And I think it has massive implications for how the younger generation is thinking about retirement, in that many of them are no longer thinking, I'm just going to work really hard for 35 or 40 years. And then when I'm in my early to mid 60s, I'm just going to retire and I'm going to enjoy the good life. So I think there's a lot more I can talk about that, but let me just stop there and see if you have any thoughts or comments about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just on the period effect, somehow I got thinking around that of how lucky I've been, right? I graduated college in 2002 and started as a financial advisor in 2003. So I started at the exact bottom of the market, which was a good thing, because all my new clients and all my personal investing was rising up for the first 4 or 5 years with the stock market. And then I had some basically some business changes that increased how well my business was doing in 2009. So I just had more income to invest into my 401k right when the market was at a bottom again. So I've had 21 years of good fortune, and I'm thinking I'm optimistic. Things are good, and I've made all these great choices, and look how well I've done with my business and all. And I'd read an article about, are you lucky or good? And I started thinking, well, how lucky am I, right? I of course, I'm a spreadsheet analyst guy. I took a look and figured out, like, what if I was my brother, who's 3 years younger, and I just kind of shifted over how things were 3 years younger, and my own personal net worth would be like 20% lower if I had just been my brother and done everything had done exactly the same, but came across 3 years younger. So it was interesting there. And my sister is 9 years younger, so she is graduating college like in 2010, 2011, where it's still a great financial crisis. There's not too many jobs around then. Right? Things are different for for the younger folks. Not trying to. I think what was interesting, you talked a little bit about this idea of the period in boomers and maybe younger folks. I don't know if what they're millennials or different names now, but part of this idea with kind of talking through retirement is, I think, looking at, okay, why are my kids not doing why aren't they doing the way I did it, right? And chances are your parents thought the same thing. How come my kids aren't doing the same thing, 40, 45 years ago on there? And so I don't know if the excuse is the right word, but the idea of here's just a different life model that chances are, if you're listening to this, your kids and your grandkids are probably going to approach, and they're hopefully maybe learning from you of why they are approaching life this way.
Yeah, and I feel like I've had a front row seat here because I've watched my parents, and my parents my dad was born in 1929 and my mom was born in 1934. And so, they go back a ways. And so I think about their generation. I watched how they lived their lives. And then I have three millennial children, three millennial daughters. And they sort of came of age in the era of social media and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. And so I feel like I've seen the older generation, I've seen the younger generation, and I'm right in the middle. And I try to be a perennial, and I try not to be categorized into any one of those. And I just try to make sure that I can roll with the changes here, as a great band did many years ago, talked about in one of their songs. And so, yeah, I think it's, you talked to yourself about, are you lucky or you're good? Well, I know you pretty well, Jeremy, and you're both. So, and I'm lucky as well. And the baby boomers are lucky. You talked about being born at the right period of time. Think about real estate. Think about home ownership. So people that were buying homes 30, 40, 50 years ago have ridden this huge wave of increases in home values. And so that has been a huge benefit to the baby boomers. And you look at the millennials and Gen Xers, they're thinking, well, am I going to see that kind of increase in home ownership values that the baby boomers got sort of this one-time huge gain from real estate? Is the next generation going to see that? A lot of them are thinking they're not going to see that. Or if they do see it, it's going to be because of significant inflation that's going to eat away their real gains there. So yeah, there's definitely things to think about here.
Yeah, and some I don't think you mentioned it yet, but this multi-stage model, another way to call it, is this palette of life model, where it's not just the earn, learn, and adjourn, but you're just instead of going sequentially, you're just doing things throughout time. One part of it is this idea of a sabbatical. I've got two friends that right around, I don't think it was exactly 45, but right around the age of 45, they took a sabbatical. So I'm approaching 45. I think I might need to do the same thing, right? And it's my daughters, my youngest daughter or oldest daughter, she'll be going to high school in a year. I'm thinking, okay, she still thinks I'm cool, relatively speaking. Like this is my last chance, perhaps, to for a few more years, right? Apparently, that might take a break for about 5, 6, 7, 8 years of when it's cool to hang out with dad. Like, who cares if I take an extra 2 weeks of vacation next year before she goes to high school? Like, I'm going to be sitting around when I'm 62 or 92 thinking like, man, I wish I had a 0.1% higher net worth. Or am I going to think of that 1 or 2 or 3 weeks that I took, with her or the family? That's the stuff that we're thinking about now, because it's like you have a choice to do that. And I think when you're approaching 62, 20 years ago, you might not have had the choice. Like you didn't have the vacation policies that are around these days, or the remote work idea. So now we have a choice, and because of that, we're trying to approach things a little differently. And you're going about it a little bit to yourself as a 62-year-old. This idea of maybe working longer but different. You don't have a corporate career, but you're doing the things that you want to do, and it's not physically demanding, right? You're going out consulting financial advisors mainly, and you can do that from anywhere, and you can do that as long as you want to.
Yeah, and I did have a corporate career for about 25 years, and working for big blue chip companies. And then when I turned 50, I basically checked it all, much to my wife's dismay. And so when I turned 50, I was in a partnership with another guy, and we had a great thing going on, and we'd been together for 11, 12 years. But when I hit 50, I sort of looked in the mirror and asked myself, okay, do I want to sort of continue this for sort of the remainder of my career, or do I want to try something different? And I decided that I wanted to try something different. And my wife looked at me and she said, "Are you sure? We got 3 kids that are either in college or they're going to be going to college. We've got 3 daughters, probably going to have 3 weddings that I'm going to want you to pay for. That'll be kind of nice." And we were coming into our highest spending years. And here I am deciding voluntarily that I'm going to quit my job and just do something new. And so I took a reasonably big risk there, and definitely struggled for a period of time afterwards until I finally found my footing. But here I am about 12 years later, and it was definitely a great decision, and things have worked out extremely well. So, I consider myself very, very fortunate that I have opportunities to do things like that and sort of carve out my particular path. And I think we'll see a lot more people doing that. And I think this idea of entrepreneurship today is actually a lot easier than it was, say, when I was growing up. I remember, back when I was coming out of college, the idea of being an entrepreneur was not a good thing. This was my perception, that if you were an entrepreneur, what that meant was no one would hire you. So you have to go out and start your own thing because no one wants to work with you. That was, sort of my warped idea of what it meant to be an entrepreneur. Of course, that's done a complete 180. And now, our biggest quote heroes in the business world seem to be entrepreneurs, these people that, start companies and make it big. So it's done a complete reversal there. So yeah, I definitely see more people being entrepreneurs. To your point earlier about taking control, I see more of the younger people deciding that they want to take control, that they don't want to have to rely on a corporation. And, this extremely well. If we go back, 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, 6 decades ago, we had defined benefit plans. So you go to work for a corporation and you would get a pension if you stayed there long enough and you retired. Today, most of those defined benefit plans have been replaced by defined contribution plans, where it's up to you to contribute to your 401k or your 403b, and you have responsibility for saving for your retirement. So it's a very different world that we live in today. And I feel like, again, to your point, that people are feeling like, I got to take control. And if it's going to happen, it's going to be up to me to make it happen.
Yeah, and if you're taking that control and you're taking the time off now, as you're younger, you're probably maybe working longer to make up for it. You might not have saved as much because you spent the money on the vacation, so you work longer, but hopefully you're enjoying it more. I think that's maybe where you're saying you're planning on working longer and you're enjoying it more because it's a different type of work, which is funny because if you work longer, that means your retirement might actually be shorter, which is odd because I'm telling every 62-year-old I talk to, your retirement's going to be longer than you think. A lot of people retire at 62 and think that their life is going to be done at 82, and statistically that's not the case. So your retirement today, if you're retiring today, plan on a retirement that's longer than you think it's going to be. And yet you shared with me before we started recording that chances are if you're doing this idea of you take some sabbaticals, you do more vacations and save less, that means your actual retirement might be shorter. How's that going to work out?
Yeah, well, and I want to share something quickly here. This idea of, plan on a long retirement. I think we all should plan for a long retirement. And I talked earlier about how people are going to be living longer. But of course, we know it doesn't always work that way. And you may have heard this recently, a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Clements, who for a long time was a personal finance writer for the Wall Street Journal and other finance type business publications. And he also had a very, very popular blog called The Humble Dollar. And he has written about saving and investing and personal finance for decades. And he's been very dutiful in terms of saving for his, quote, retirement. Well, he just announced here recently that he's been diagnosed with cancer and he has about 12 to 18 months to live. He's 61 years old. And so, again, this idea of, are we going to work for 30 or 40 years, try and save up a big pot of money so that then we can retire when we're in our early 60s and then have another 10, 20, 30, 40 years in retirement to spend the money that we work so hard to earn? It's not working out that way for Jonathan Clements. And of course, I think each of you listening, you probably know someone who had a similar experience where they retired in their early, say, 60s, and they didn't live very long afterwards, and they were not able to enjoy those retirement years. So I think we've seen that happen enough that the younger generation is looking at that and they're saying, I'm not going to wait until I'm 60 to 65 to take that cruise or take that trip to Iceland or take that trip to Europe or go trek to Machu Picchu. They're like, I want to do this while I still can. I want to do this while I'm young, while I'm healthy. And so this idea of people working longer, this idea of people taking sabbaticals, this idea of people having this palette of life model where they're going to segue in and out of different things, that to me is where this is coming from. They're saying, look, I don't want to wait until the end. I don't want to backload the fun in my life. I'm going to take it along the way. And so what that means then is I'm going to have to work longer because I'm probably not going to have saved up as much money as I would have if I would have taken sort of the traditional 3-stage life model. And so that I think is what's happening here with people likely going to have to work longer, but also enjoying life more along the way as opposed to back-ending it.
Yeah, it's and I think it's the reason a lot of people did it is because they felt like they have to. What we're saying, I'm hearing from all kinds of folks, is that you don't have to. You don't have to work till you're 65 just for the health insurance. There's other options, right? You don't have to do specific things at specific ages. It's almost like this age was telling you what to do, and now it's more like go and tell yourself what to do. Tell your money what to do. Tell yourself what to do with your age, as opposed to the other way around. And of course, if you're working in retirement, that means you might save actually less for retirement. And hopefully, you're saving less for retirement because you're being intentional and you're doing that with vacations or time off or different things. We have a podcast or a YouTube video actually talking about the book Die with Zero, where the author talks about how if you build up to a certain level, kind of what's the point? Like what's the point after that? You're sacrificing your life today for something in the future that might not show up, like Jonathan's Clemens here is experiencing. Although thankfully for him, I'd say he probably did enjoy his work. He probably got enjoyment out of savings, but there's a lot of people that aren't in his shoes where they probably felt forced into or had to save or keep on working.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating about Jonathan, and I've never met him personally, but he's written 2 or 3 articles now about his situation, and there is no trace of bitterness in there. There's no trace of, hey, why is this happening to me? Woe is me. He's taken an extremely mature and big perspective about this, and he doesn't, of course he's sad and he's disappointed that this has happened, not just for him, but for his family members who are, gonna live without him in the remaining years. So, but I would encourage folks listening to this to Google him and just read some of the articles, because he's written some really good things here about the perspective that he's taken on the fact that he's probably not going to be around here after 12 to 18 months, and just some of the life lessons that he's learned and the perspective that he's gleaned from all of this. So I think it's very, very instructional there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to sum some things up here for us where that basically when you're listening to this and you're 60 years old, don't do the traditional retirement just because you feel like you have to. Take some time to think of your purpose, like Doc G and Fritz Gilbert are talking about. Think of your purpose and go find that purpose, which could be working less, could be retiring today to the grandkids or something else as well too. And of course, if you are someone who has the traditional retirement and feel like that's the way to go, and you're kind of pulling your hair out, like what are my kids doing with not buying a house when they're 30 years old, or they're taking off to vacations? Like, how come the kids are going out and doing cruises? I'm working hard so I can do that when I'm 70. Like they're kind of looking at you perhaps and saying, yeah, I don't want to do that. I see how hard my parents worked and how they delayed that gratification, and they're wanting to take some of that fun time now, I think, is the what they're trying to do. Good. Well, Steve, I've got one more question for you. Before that, tell us, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, you can visit me on LinkedIn if anyone wants to connect with me there. That's certainly a great place. I also have a website called stevesanduski.com, and that's last name is spelled Sanduski.
All right. So you're not retiring to the Sandusky, Ohio, to do the
No,
amusement park. That's not in the family background.
Have not been to Cedar Point in Ohio yet. Have not been to Sandusky, Ohio. So sounds the same, but spelled differently.
Yep, for sure. Well, I might have taken away perhaps the answer to this next question, which my final question is, tell us something about yourself that few people know about. And remember, this podcast is ready clean.
Let's see here. I just took up sailing. So my wife and I, in the past 12 months, have taken 4 sailing certification classes through the American Sailing Association. So as of now, we're both, quote, certified to be able to skipper a monohull sailboat as well as a catamaran. And we also just recently joined a sailing club out here in Oregon. So we're going to be spending a lot more time on the water sailing. And the hope is that we'll be able to spend a lot of time on sailboats with our kids and grandkids and just really enjoying not only the Pacific Northwest, but hopefully a lot of other beautiful sailing destinations throughout the world.
That's awesome. Sounds great. When's your next trip? Do you have one booked right now?
Sailing trip or?
Sailing trip, yeah.
Yeah. The next sailing trip is in February of 2025. I'm heading down to Antigua to participate in the Caribbean 600, which is a 600 nautical mile sailboat race. So I'm going to be one of the crew members, and it's going to be pretty wild.
That's awesome.
I got a lot of training to do to get ready for that.
Yep.
But yeah, that'll be fun.
That sounds like fun. Well, you're living out a bit of this where your life planning is changing. Your financial planning is probably changing because of this passion that you get to do with your wife too, and hopefully, like I said, kids and grandkids. And I think part of that, that's what I asked Doc G. I said, "You're a doctor. What's the number one tip for living healthy?" And he said, "Have a purpose." Right. So having a purpose, living out a purpose, that's a way to live healthy. Thanks for coming on, talking about that, and sharing a bit of your experience and perhaps what we need to do or what our kids might be doing based on living healthy to 100.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Jeremy.
Absolutely, Steve. And thank you for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you will feel better about your money and you will make better money decisions. Hi, I'm Jeremy Keil, owner of Keil Financial Partners. And if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients get more income, pay less in taxes, and avoid big retirement mistakes, make sure to go to keilfp.com. That's KEILFP.com.